We want to welcome you on behalf of Sustainable San Mateo County. My name is Terry Nagel. I'm the interim executive director. We're still looking for a new ED if you know anyone who's interested. And today is all about expanding the electric vehicle charging network throughout California. We have a jam-packed program for you that includes some excellent speakers. You can see their names there. We'll introduce them as we go. And we also have a brief trivia quiz for you, which we always do at these happy hours. The happy hours are a chance for people to get together informally with experts to learn about new topics. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Give you just a brief introduction to Sustainable San Mateo County. A lot of you are familiar with us, but for those who aren't, our vision is that we have a county that is sustainable for everyone and for future generations. We've been around since 1992, and we're all about programs that accelerate sustainability, primarily at the local government level. And we believe in the 3 E's approach. That is that the economy and social equity and the environment all need to be in balance to have a healthy world. We also have some key programs. In addition to these happy hours, we have our indicators report, which takes a deep dive into one sustainability issue each year. And we analyze what it impacts, how it impacts San Mateo County. And we also come up with recommendations for improving the situation. This year, the topic is children, youth, and families and their well-being in San Mateo County. We have a sustainability dashboard that measures the progress on sustainability metrics by all 20 cities in the county, as well as the county itself. And we share that information with the cities to show how they're doing. At those same meetings, we introduce solutions from our Sustainability Ideas Bank, which is now close to 100 solutions that cities can easily adopt to accelerate sustainability. Excuse me. Sorry about that. And when we meet with them, we show them, the areas in which they're doing well. And then we also show them some areas where they might want some help. And that's where the Ideas Bank comes in. We're really well known for our annual awards celebration. And this is an event where we celebrate all of those who've contributed to improving sustainability in the county. These are highly sought after awards. And the event itself is a lot of fun. It's about 300 people. Last spring, we got back together for the first time in several years. And it really is the go-to event for people that care about sustainability issues. Next slide, please. So I just want to take a moment to urge you to become involved with Sustainable San Mateo County. You can volunteer for one of our committees. Right now, we're asking people to volunteer for both our indicators report and for the sustainability dashboard. We're taking another look at the dashboard before we go out and gather more data to decide which metrics we want to use going forward. So if you go to the page at the bottom of the screen, just our URL/join, you can learn more about all the committees, all the volunteer opportunities. You can sign up for our newsletter. And if you're on our newsletter list, you will hear about our events. Of course, we'd also appreciate your help as a sponsor. So let's go now to our trivia contest. And that's Sarah. Would you like to take us forward?
I would be happy to. So tonight's trivia, we have 3 questions, all related to electric vehicles. Let's see how you do. You can put your answers in the chat. The first question, what year does California's mandate that all new cars be zero emission take effect? 2025, 2030, 2035, or 2040? Take a moment to put your answers in the chat, and we'll see what the correct answer is.
So Sarah, can you see what people are guessing? What's the most guessed answer?
I can't because I'm sharing my screen and can't see the chat, but take a look.
I'm going to look for you, and I see 2035 seems to be really the leading answer. So,
That is the correct answer.
ah,
California
okay.
is requiring that all new
Okay.
cars sold in 2035 and beyond be zero emission, which includes battery electric vehicles, plug-in hybrids, and fuel cell electrics. Second question is, the average estimated range per hour added by a level 2 charger is 5 miles, 25 miles, 50 miles, or 200? Add your
That's good.
answers in the chat. Tell me what they're saying, Terry.
Yeah, I'm looking. Let's see, 25, 2. I guess that's answer 2 is 25, 50,
Yes.
25, 25, 25, 50. So mostly 25 and 50 here.
25 miles is the correct answer. Level 2 charging does add about that much of driving range per hour. For those of you who aren't as familiar with the different levels of chargers, level 1 is the standard 120 volt plug, level 2 is the 240 volt, and then level 3 is the fast charge. And now our final trivia question. EV owners save an average of how much per year in ownership costs versus a medium-sized sedan owner? So ownership costs are just maintenance, not related to how much they save on gas. So answer 1, $350, 2 is $482, 3 is $500, and 4 is $552. It's a pretty narrow range.
And it's
What
all
have we
over the
got,
map.
Terry?
We're getting answers on all of those, except the last one. I don't see anybody doing 552, but yeah.
The correct answer is $482. EVs don't require the same kinds of tune-ups, oil changes, and some of the other types of routine maintenance, so ownership costs do tend to be lower. All right.
Yeah, and that's such a shock. With our EV, I'm still looking at gas prices and going, oh, there's a good price on gas. And no, I don't need that anymore. It's great.
It is nice. All right. Terry, would you like to introduce our next speaker?
Sure, I would be happy to. So our first speaker of the evening is Joe Ficalora. He's Associate Program Manager for Peninsula Clean Energy. He leads their EV Ready program, and they just hit a wonderful milestone of installing 500 EV chargers, which is really incredible. Now, Joe is installing chargers in multifamily, workplace, and public settings. And he's been working in this space for more than 12 years. Before he joined Peninsula Clean Energy, he worked with Nissan North America, where he was a specialist in home charging solutions, and also he worked with dealerships. He is responsible for installing more than 10,000 L1, L2, and L3 chargers throughout the US and Canada. So Joe, take it away.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'm going to talk about obstacles to EV charging expansion, specifically here in San Mateo County, but also the state as well. Next slide, please. For anyone that's not familiar with Peninsula Clean Energy, we're a nonprofit, locally led electricity provider. So we provide clean energy through PG&E's infrastructure. Next slide. At the end of this presentation, the takeaways are going to be the progress on EV charging. We're behind schedule. And a lot of EV projects are overbuilt and too expensive. So what we try to do at Peninsula Clean Energy is use level 1 charging when it's the right size charging case use, as well as power managed level 2 chargers. And these work very well in long dwell applications. So home charging, workplace charging, where the cars are going to be parked for quite some time. Next slide. Some of the challenges to EV charging. We're not on track to meet deployment. And for the state, we need 4 to 6 million chargers. The entire state, we're currently at 100,000. Specifically in San Mateo County, we need 70,000 chargers by 2023. We currently have 5,000. We focus on apartment complexes and condo multi-unit dwelling sites. We got to make sure we get chargers accessible to renters. They're probably the longest life cycle as far as projects, but they're also the most critical. Like I said earlier, EV charging is overbuilt, expensive. The average cost through PG&E to install a port is $17,500. If we were to install chargers at that cost throughout the state, the budget's going to be $100 billion. That's astronomical. If we go to the next slide. So the way we look at charging, you want to use the right size charging. So when you're on the road, you're taking a long trip, you're traveling, several hundred miles, pull off the freeway, you want a fast charger, you want to get back on track as quick as possible. So for corridors, highways, freeways, L3 fast charging is the right way to go. For destination charges, when you get to where you're going, that kind of covers, the entire spectrum of charging, level 2, high level 2s, as well as L3 charging, because you're probably not going to be there for an extended period of time, but you'll have a little bit of time where you can plug in and grab a quick drink, for your battery. And then we have workplace and residential charging, where in those cases, they're best suited for charge rates of 1.9 to 7 kilowatt hours. Next slide. Level 2 isn't the solution all the time. We see this all the time at apartments and condos. Site hosts, they're so hyper-focused on L2 chargers. We have to charge these vehicles as quick as possible. But what they're forgetting to see is that these cars are going to be parked for 10 to 12 hours overnight. So you have the luxury of time in these, in these settings. And you put a level 2 charger in that space, and it's going to charge the car in probably 4 hours. And then, the other 8 hours, it's just sitting dormant. Next slide. That's important because we have to, it's cost. The average driver in San Mateo County drives between 20 to 35 miles daily in their commute. So 95% of drivers are going to be served with an L1 charger that charges at 1.7 kilowatt hours. Our solution through EV Ready is use the level 1 chargers, which at 1.9 kilowatt hours will charge 40 to 50 miles overnight, which will satisfy most commuters' needs, or power managed level 2 chargers. What power managed level 2 chargers, that would be using 140 amp circuit and wiring 4 L2 chargers in series. Next slide. So just to give you a quick background on the technology. So as you can see in the top graphic, there's a 40 amp circuit with 1 charger, 1 car plugged in. So that charger is going to charge at 7.7 kilowatt hours. Now, if another car plugs in, if you look at the second graphic, the power is going to be split in half. So both vehicles are going to be charged at 3.8 kilowatt hours. Now, if everybody charges at one time, you get 4 vehicles on one circuit, you're still getting the 1.9 kilowatt hours, and you're still going to get that 40 to 50 miles of range recharge overnight. It's very rare that cars plug in, everyone plugs in at the same time. Every battery is at a different, different capacity. So as cars get charged, the chargers come off, and then they're going to charge at a faster rate as the other cars get charged. Next slide. So to meet the needs for getting as many chargers out as we can to try to meet these goals, The cost of level 1 ports is $2,500 for an install, whereas a power managed level 2 charger is about $4,000 per port. So that brings the cost down tremendously. If we go to the next slide, I have a case where through our EV Ready program, we have a free technical assistance program where site hosts, they sign up for the incentive. They don't really know, which way to go with charging. We educate them on the right size charging, where level 1 charging is best used, where power managed level 2 charging is best used. And through our technical assistance program, we've been able to increase the project scope of work, which is the number of chargers, by 50%. Specifically in condos and apartment complexes, we've been able to increase the number of chargers by 70%. If we go to the next slide, this is a project that we just completed in Belmont. It was a 39 unit MUD. They came in looking at 12 chargers. They went through our technical assistance program. They ended up going with 32 L1 chargers using the right size principles. The final cost of the project was a little over $76,000, close to $77,000. Our incentive offset that by $64,000. So the out-of-pocket cost of the customer was $12,690, which works out to $400 per L1 port. The cost savings is phenomenal. Now, had they not gone through the program, they would have probably had 5 L2 chargers, not looking at their existing capacity, had each charger on one circuit, and we're only able to serve a handful of EV drivers at a time. So you can go to our website. You can, if you go to peninsulacleanenergy.com, EV Ready, we have the details of the program, the incentive amounts, the program guidelines, as well as the link to sign up for our free technical assistance program. That's all I got. Any questions?
You.
My email's there. Feel free to email me.
Yeah.
Be more than happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I think we have time for a few questions now, and there's tons of them in the chat. So let me just throw some at you here. One person, Remy Chan, is asking, have we accounted for battery replacement costs when you're talking about the costs here?
No, when we talk about costs, we're just talking about installing the chargers from start to finish.
Okay. And someone, Preddy Hemeyer, would like to know about the cost of ownership for a plug-in versus an electric vehicle. What's the difference in that cost? Do you know?
As from a charging perspective or from a vehicle's perspective?
I think the cost of operating is what they're probably talking about.
Obviously plug-in hybrids, they still have an internal combustion engine, so the costs are going to be pretty similar to a regular internal combustion vehicle, probably a little bit less depending on how much you're going to drive in pure electric mode.
Okay. And here's one that I had. I think someone answered this. What do you mean by overbuilt? That's when the charger is more than is needed.
Sure, yeah. Overbuilt is you're going to use a level 2 charger when you have a 10-hour dwell time. So a car, and this is specific. I'll give a specific example for workplace charging. Cars are parked there for 4 hours or 8 hours rather, at least. Your cars are going to be parked. Cars are going to be charged in 4 hours. You're going to have to worry about shuffling cars around because overbuilt also includes the cost, right? So if you're installing L2 chargers, 1 charger per circuit, that's way more expensive, and you're limited by the electrical capacity that the site has to provide. So you're only going to be able to fit a finite amount of chargers if you look at level 2 chargers on 1 circuit. Whereas if you go to power managed level 2, you're going to be able to fit more chargers. If you're looking at level 1 charging as well, which suits workplace charging very well. You're going to be able to get even more chargers, because the chargers, L1 chargers, work on 20 amp circuits. So it uses less electrical capacity from the site.
And when you say power managed, what do you mean by that, Joe?
That would be level 2 chargers in series off of one circuit instead of one charger per circuit.
Okay. Okay. And then there's another question about how can the Inflation Reduction Act help California and this county reach its goal of having the necessary EV chargers by 2035?
With the infrastructure and the EV tax credits, obviously, you know, that's going to offset some of the cost of ownership for vehicles as well as charging. Our program offsets the cost as well. I think our average cost for L1 projects is probably around $1,000 per port overall. If you go to our website, we have some case studies where our incentive has completely offset the cost of the chargers. So the site hosts are paying nothing for the chargers.
Wow, that's amazing. It really is. John Kennedy. John, I don't know if you could unmute yourself for a second and just talk about your experience. It sounds interesting.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. This is John Kennedy. I'm in Menlo Park. We are in a 12 building complex or 12 unit complex. We actually first looked at the level 2 chargers, but as Joe just talked about, we did not have enough power coming in to do that, and to move into a level 2 would have been $10,000 or $12,000 to work with PG&E to bring higher power in. And then in working with one of the consultants that they have, which is Clear Results out of Oakland, they talked to me and said, well, you know, you're only using 25 or 30 miles a day. You really don't need that level 2 service. I mean, you're just going to try to put back what you used for that day. And so they worked with me quite extensively about understanding consumption and devices and all the things are out there, and came back and said, you know, we can actually put in 12 level 1 chargers and you guys will be happy. And you know, that's essentially what did happen. Is we put that in. We have 12 stations down in the lower garage area to accommodate all the vehicles that are there. And to date, and we've had this now for about 5 months, it's been working just really well. And we used, I don't know if it's okay to talk about other vendors, but we used, and I saw this in some of Joe's pictures, we use Orange as the device for the plug-in and everything. And their software actually answers a question, I guess, that this other person had, that you register with them. And so as you use power, it gets billed back to you under your account, like many of the login services charge from that standpoint. So the HOA then gets reimbursed as they collect funds from us, and then money comes back into the HOA to reimburse for the actual power usage. So it all works out pretty well.
That's great. We have many more questions, but I think we need to move on now to our next speaker. So that would be Esther Conrad. And I think your bio is loading here. But so anyway, Esther is the research manager for the Bill Lane Center for the West at Stanford University. And she coordinates and contributes to group research projects there. And she works with partners, she works with the student researchers and postdoctoral scholars, and runs the AmeriWest seminar series. Esther has worked for more than 20 years in the environmental field with a focus on environmental policy and governance. So she's going to take this conversation into a more policy level. How can we make that happen at the policy level? She previously worked for the Haas Center for Public Service at Stanford, where she helped engage students in real-world sustainability challenges. And that's where we met Esther. She actually helped find a number of students who applied to work on our Sustainability Ideas Bank as summer interns. So welcome, Esther. And now we'll turn it over to Esther.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. Just briefly about the Bill Lane Center. So the Bill Lane Center for the American West focuses on issues of the American West through both research and education. A lot of our projects do relate to sustainability. I'm going to focus here on our permitting for EV charging stations. We also do a lot of engagement with our stakeholders who are working on these issues throughout our projects. So I'm very open to hearing from everybody about the issues that you're facing. We love research collaborations with government, non-governmental agencies as well. So look forward to more dialogue. So I wanted to introduce our student team. Not all are here right now. We're actually toward the tail end of the summer, but I believe at least Andrew and Lee are here, and possibly a few others. So we had a wonderful set of 6 students over the summer, and a couple of students this past spring who've been working on this specific project, and actually have interviewed our previous speaker, Joe, as part of this project. And again, I can't see who all is on here, but we've also spoken to a couple people in the other people in the county. Next slide. And then briefly, just to introduce the faculty and staff, another person who's here in this Zoom room is Preeti Haymeyer, who's at the Stanford Institute for Economic Policy Research, or CEPR, and Professor Kane is the director of the Bill Lane Center, has been deeply involved. And then we also have Michael Bennon from the Stanford Center for Democracy Development and the Rule of Law. So next slide, please. Great. Quick overview of our the presentation today. I'm going to talk about efforts in the state of California to streamline permitting for EV charging stations. We've been doing some interviewing of local jurisdictions around barriers that they're experiencing to implementing this. So I'm going to mentioning a few here, but I'll go into those in the presentation. We've also heard a bunch of ideas for how to address those barriers. This is a project that's underway right now, and so we are still looking to speak with some additional people about in both counties and cities who are working on these permitting challenges. And so we very much welcome your feedback. Next slide. Great. So there is a great need, as Joe already emphasized, to invest in EV charging infrastructure. The state, I was reading about a state goal of 250,000 charging stations by 2025 from Joe's slides, that we kind of need to aim for a lot more than that. But as Joe mentioned, we're at about 100,000 right now. So we have a long way to go. There is a lot of funding out there. So this is just 2 sources of funding. You already heard about some wonderful rebates from PC and PCE, and there are other sources across the state in addition to these. But for all of them, local jurisdictions need to grant the permits for them. And so that is the challenge that we're focused on here. The next slide, please. Starting in 2017, the state, recognizing this challenge, sought to introduce some efforts to streamline the permitting process. So this is sort of standards set at the state level that, as I'm sure many of those who work for local government who are on this call may be aware of these, or aware of similar kinds of things coming from the state, saying here's some things that, the standards that the processes need to meet at the local level. Always a challenge to sort of track these and implement them, I know. So this is sort of the overview of what's happening with the streamlining of EV permit charging. There's a requirement to have a checklist to facilitate the submittal and review of permits, and an online process for applying. The review of permits for EV charging stations is limited to health and safety issues. So that means aesthetics, et cetera, are sort of not supposed to be holding things up. There is supposed to be one set of comments provided back to those who submit requests for permits, and there's some specific timelines for approval of these, depending on the size of the group of charging stations. Next slide, please. So our research collaboration arose out of a conversation with GoBiz, that is the Governor's Office for Business and Economic Development. And they provide a lot of support and guidance to, excuse me, to local jurisdictions. So for example, they have this EV charging station permitting guidebook that includes a lot of guidance on how to implement, and they also do a lot of tracking of where are jurisdictions at in terms of implementing streamlining legislation. And so what they're asked to us was, could you look into more, like what are really the issues that local governments are facing on the ground as they seek to implement streamlining, or even once they're streamlined, to actually process these permits. So that's what the focus here is. Next slide. These are all of the research questions that we've been looking into. I'm just going to focus in this presentation on the ones in the green box there, which are what are the key sources of delay. Our focus is on publicly accessible charging stations. We have not looked at residential charging. And what kind of resources and support do jurisdictions need to address the barriers? We have also attempted to look into whether approval times for these permits have changed since the streamlining legislation was enacted. That's actually turns out to be very difficult to do because of data not being easily available on a consistent basis across jurisdictions. And so the short answer there is there needs to be more work done in terms of consistency and transparency of data. And we've also looked into some of the rebate funds that come out of the program called Cal EVP, which is run by the California Energy Commission. Next slide. So these are the jurisdictions we've been able to, and other stakeholders that we've been able to speak with so far. And again, this project is still underway. So we've got 4 cities in the Bay Area, 4 in other parts of the state, a couple of counties, Peninsula Clean Energy and Silicon Valley Clean Energy, both community choice aggregators, as well as a few developers. Next slide. So what have we been finding? So permitting delays. So it is, we've spoken to folks who've said, it is actually really challenging to get all of these complex requirements down into a checklist. There are templates. There are templates available from GoBiz, but it's still difficult when reconciling local requirements with the state's guidelines. There are conflicts with local zoning codes, and I'll mention a little bit more about that in a future slide. Sources of delay in processing permits, even once you're streamlined. So larger and complex projects really do take a lot longer. There are more departments that need to get involved. There are more plan checks. There are more safety issues, especially if you're installing larger numbers of charging stations, or if those are level 3, the fast chargers, just a lot more electricity going to the site. So you have a lot of more requirements around those. Staffing and workload is especially challenging, and we've, at least so far, according to the interviews, we've heard that it's more in the larger jurisdictions, which are having a lot of demand for all kinds of permitting. They're dealing with a lot of different issues. However, I would not say that the small jurisdictions, have it easy, of course, being smaller budgets, but they are sometimes able to turn these permits around, at least in our, from what we've learned, a little bit quicker sometimes. Meeting ADA requirements is often very complicated and needs a lot of attention. There needs to be a clear path to those charging stations, and sometimes where you can get the electricity isn't at that same site in the parking lot as where the ADA requirements would ideally want you to put it, things like that. And then, as Joe mentioned, there's actually, the applicant error in submitting and completing checklists and the requirements, and sometimes that does slow things down. Next slide. Other barriers, and some of these are significant ones. So energization delays. So that means how long does it take to kind of get energy to the site that where you need it for these charging stations? And that's especially true if you want to install fast chargers. So just as one example, the city of Fresno really wanted to put in some charging stations in their city yard where they could charge the city's cars and some trucks and really expand that out. But when they spoke with PG&E, PG&E was talking about it's going to be 2025, possibly, or 2026 before we can get those that level of electricity out to that site. So that made it pretty challenging for them to implement that particular plan. Maintenance issues. Again, this is sort of an example from Fresno. Fresno has had some pretty significant vandalism and theft of copper wire. And we haven't heard the specific thing from a lot of other jurisdictions, although the maintenance issues are fairly pervasive. But it got so bad that they were, losing so many of these and having to reinstall that they actually built metal boxes around the charging stations, which they lock at night. But unfortunately, that does mean that you can't charge at night. These are in sort of public parking lots. So those are challenging. And then cities and counties really want to seek funding to install chargers in more disadvantaged areas, maybe areas where developers wouldn't be seeking out placing some charging. But those applications can be quite time consuming. We spoke to a disadvantaged community, meaning lower income community, where they had applied and it had been a full year before they even were hearing back about a particular funding source. And also these applications are pretty time consuming. So next slide. So how to address these barriers. So one comment about the zoning, the city of Oakland is considering a zoning code update in September, where they are going to deem charging stations to be an essential service, and that would enable them to be placed in any part of the city. Currently, it had to be associated with a particular activity or facility, and that was limiting where they could actually place some of those charging stations. And reach codes, a number of cities have implemented these. That is going beyond state standards. City of Mountain View has done some interesting things where addressing existing buildings and not just new buildings, reserving breaker spaces and making sure there's the capacity to add EV charging later, and requiring to add chargers on 10% of parking spaces when making other upgrades. Next slide. Yeah, streamlining grant processes. These are a number of the ideas that local government officials came up with and shared with us about, things that would help them. That is, things like finding out, it takes a long time to figure out which particular funding opportunities are actually right for a given jurisdiction, assistance with that, figuring out ways to sort of make it less uncertain if you're putting in a lot of effort into grant proposals. So formula rated versus competitive grants or two-step grant processes, reducing wait times for decisions on grants. You often need matching funds for some grants. So, finding ways to hold those funds in reserve, and then staff time is also a big concern, and if funding were available for that sort of thing. Next slide. How to speed up the permitting process. So many people said we just need more staff. Some were dealing with a lot of demand for these, said we need actually a staff person just focused on permitting for EV chargers. Grant funds to hire consultants who can help just kind of implement the streamlining. A couple of people at least mentioned there could be some lessons learned from implementing some permitting streamlining that happened for solar panel installations. And we haven't delved into exactly how that process has worked, but one person did mention a related thing, which is an app that I think came through in one of the comments, on the chat comments, solar app, which one person in one building official mentioned, well, why couldn't there be an app like this, which would help us coordinate between the contractors and the jurisdiction around the permitting for all of the electrical issues that have to be worked out for these charging stations. Next slide. And finally, we really do welcome your feedback. If you work for a local jurisdiction or are kind of involved in these issues in some other way, we're really interested in your thoughts on these questions. Challenges about EV permitting, permitting of EV charging stations, feedback on the streamlining requirements, your experience with getting funding, and any additional support you might need. And the final slide has my email address, esther@stanford.edu. We're also, please also feel free to put your email in the chat, and we're happy to reach out to you as well. Thank you so much, and look forward to conversation.
Great, and we have lots more questions too. First, I want to say I do recognize a lot of names on this call as people who are working in this space. I recognize some sustainability professionals who are also working with cities. So I think there is a lot of good feedback you're going to get from both the comments and the discussion here. So at this point, why don't we open it up to some comments? If you would like to talk, you can raise your hand, and we will try to recognize you and then unmute yourself, and you can say what you would like to ask. Okay, I see David. Go for it.
Yes, I did have the comment about the Solar App Plus. This is a national effort to streamline solar, and their eventual goal is to streamline all electrification permitting. So it seems that EV charger permitting would be the next thing to happen, since that's very critical. Most of the code is based on the National Electric Code. So it's easy to do an online, fill out the form, make sure it's correct. You have to have buy-in with the local jurisdictions, but there's state funding for this to help them. It's free for the local jurisdictions. It's minimal cost for permitting. And essentially you skip all plan check and get your permit online. And then there's a checklist that both the contractor and the inspector see and understand that's what's going to be asked for. So there's no playing games about this or that, or different inspector in a different area calling for different requirements that were not on the permit, et cetera, all the horror stories you've heard. So this pushing them to do EV charging next would be a huge advantage for this effort.
Sounds like a great idea, don't you think, Esther?
Yeah, that's wonderful. And didn't realize that they had that broader aim. So we'll definitely look into that more. Yeah.
It's the initial goal. They're still trying to include solar permitting with batteries, which is very fast changing field, but the next one's electrification. I'll put a link to that in the chat.
That's great. I want to bring up something too. I've heard from local city representatives. The idea, would it be possible to have several cities work together on an application for chargers? I mean, to share the workload and do the project in a larger region. Is that something anybody has experience with?
We didn't hear about that in any of the conversations yet, but just to clarify, do you mean that cities would come up with a shared process? Is that right? Or
yeah, because
okay,
especially in San Mateo County, most of the cities are quite small, and I've heard that filling out these applications is very onerous, takes forever. And I remember them commenting on the ADA regulations alone are overwhelming. So if they could all together work on one application, that would supply chargers, sort of a group buy, if you will.
Okay, a grant application.
That would be good. So I see that Craig has his hand up.
Yes, thank you. Great presentations. The Clean Coalition works with a lot of, we do a lot of solar microgrid work and facilitate such initiatives, and a lot of electrification comes along with that. And we've got a campus that is being rebuilt that's going to have at least 22 EV chargers, mostly for employees that'll be there for, the stretch of the day. So this type of solution could work for them, even in the middle of the day, not necessarily overnight. And I'm wondering, it's a brand new campus, so we're dealing with architects and everybody else that's on the design team, lots of people. This is like $100 million project, and everybody needs to know, how big is it? Where does it need to go? How much space does it need to be? What are the setbacks? Like just really practical knowledge about what the installation is going to look like, and how much space it's going to consume. I like that. The sounds of this orange solution sound really good. I don't know if they're just the service or if they're the hardware as well. At the end of the day, the hardware is going to determine how much space is required. So is that something that PCE helps out with, or where can I get the kind of the configuration, installation / configuration information for some viable solutions?
Craig,
Joe?
I'm so sorry. I was trying to answer questions in the meeting chat, so I was only half listening. I'll direct message you my email, and then I can point you in the right direction. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you. Really appreciate that, Joe.
We have a bunch of questions about the reliability of public chargers and how to ensure that they are well maintained. Is that anything that you folks have come across?
Yeah. I'm laughing at the same time. Yeah, asset management for most EVSE manufacturers has not been on the radar in any way, shape, or form. If you look at EV adoption rates, over the past 5 years, they've skyrocketed. When I worked at Nissan, Tesla was probably selling 5 cars a year. Nissan, maybe 20. So it was, it's been an exponential growth. Chargers have been getting out in the wild, but a lot of EVSE manufacturers have overlooked asset management completely. Electrify America does have a maintenance program where they have a fleet of EVs, out driving, plugging into their charging stations to make sure, everything's working, it looks good, there's nothing, strange at the site, right? If there's, a homeless person holed up or something, or graffiti, the LCD screens are scratched out. They're doing a proactive program. A lot of time, I'm actually managed that program at one of my previous positions. There's still a lot to be desired. EV drivers would get there and charges would be down. How long were they down? Right? It's a pain point right now, but I have faith that'll change.
Did anybody bring that up to you, Esther, in your conversations?
Yeah, I mean, just that maintenance issues came up repeatedly. In one jurisdiction, they actually have their inspectors go out and check. So if somebody reports, hey, this thing isn't working, the city inspectors go out and check, is it working, is it not working, and then report it back to whoever received the permit, because they want to make, you've gotten this permit to maintain and operate this device, so it's not working. So there's that avenue for maintenance, but I'm not sure that all cities are really have that capacity to do that. And then I'm not sure we heard other specific things, except that we heard that it was really a problem. One of the students did a little bit of research related to how EV charging and maintenance issues are being dealt with in Norway, which
Hmm.
is probably the world leader in terms of rolling out the EV infrastructure and EVs in general. And they have a concept which again, this is all sort of just last week we started learning about this. So the e-hubs that they have, where it's sort of really hyper local, and there's something to be learned potentially from Norway, but I'm sorry that I can't be more specific about that right now. But I hope to be able to follow up and have that as part of our report moving forward. And then there's, the sort of copper wire issue, which Terry, I saw your comment in there, like there should be a way to kind of have a card to open them if it's behind a sort of a locked kind of thing to keep the wires safe. There should be some way to open it with a card or
One more thing we've heard from a lot of folks on is the need for more renters to have access to EV
Yes.
chargers. In fact, one of the sustainability coordinators in the county, the coordinator for Menlo Park, told us that she bought an EV, and because she lived in an apartment, she could not figure out how to charge it. So she returned it to the dealer, if you can believe that. Yeah. So, I mean, this is a big problem. We have one solution in our ideas bank about an idea that's caught on in Europe and also LA, streetlight chargers. You can add a charger to a streetlight, but that's, still a limited number. Anybody else have any thoughts about that? So, to be continued. So any other questions? We have Remy. Would you like to say something, Remy Chan?
Yeah, just quickly, one of the issues I think with the EV charging is, yes, you can charge it overnight on a level 1, which is great. But I think it's each building or location probably needs, some level 2, especially for the small battery cars, the older ones, because they can maybe make one round trip, but then if you have to come back, make another round trip, which is, often a thing, with, stay-at-home moms and dads that got multiple trips to school and soccer and that sort of thing, it's an issue. So, having that flexibility would be great. Also, if you don't need all that battery range, then, they're all going about, making these huge batteries, which increases the price of the car. So, I mean, in an ideal world, you might have one EV that has long range for traveling, and then one with short range. And a short range car is a lot lighter. I have one of these Spark EVs, and that thing's like a go-kart. And it gets actually very good, miles per kilowatt hour, because the thing is a lot lighter. I mean, the companies are making all these very heavy SUV things, which is, I don't think they're getting even 3 kilowatt hours. I think the Ford F-150 gets like 1.6 or maybe 2 at best, So, I mean, just kind of something to think about.
These are great comments, folks. So many questions. We're going to forward these to our speakers, and if they would like to try to reply to any of these, then we can make the answers available to you, or you can contact them directly. So Esther and Joe, do you want to put your contact information in the chat also, so people can remember how to get a hold of you? And I think we'll need to move on now and close out this meeting, but it's been very interesting hearing these different perspectives. We now have a quick poll we'd like you to take. Just take a moment to answer these questions. Give you just another minute to answer those questions. And And then, Sarah, if you'd like to move on to the next slide while people are finishing that up. Okay. Oh, it's doing its loading thing again. Okay. Well, I wanted to tell you about a couple of programs we have coming up. One is on October 3rd, which is a Tuesday night. We're pretty excited about this. We just sent out the word today. I don't know if you heard about this big climate case where 16 young people sued the state of Montana, charging that according to their state constitution, they were supposed to protect their health and the environment, and they weren't doing that. Instead, they were propping up gas and oil. So we're having a program on October 3rd in the evening, 7 to 8:30 at the Burlingame Community Center. And it will feature one of the lead attorneys in that case, as well as two of the young plaintiffs who were successful in this lawsuit. It will also talk about other similar lawsuits that are going on, and it's free. We're able to get the space for free, so we are not going to charge for it. I will put the sign up link. It will fill quickly because we only have 110 spaces, and a lot of them have already gone today. But it is a wonderful program, and I hope you will be able to join us. So let me just throw that. I think I have it saved here. Yeah, there's the link to sign up if you're interested. Don't hesitate, because I think it will be all signed up in a couple of days. And then we have other programs coming up. We will inform you of those in our newsletter if you care to sign up for that. And you can do that by going to our website. It's sustainablesanmateo.org, and there is in the upper right corner a contact button. Click on that, and you can also sign up for the newsletter there. So I want to thank our two speakers, Joe and Esther. Thank you very much for this very informative presentation, and thank you all for coming. I think we learned a lot, and we will try to synthesize what we learned and share it with others. So thanks again.